Usually when we talk about a heist, there's a very specific script we all kind of expect.
Right, the typical Hollywood scenario.
Exactly. You picture like the shattered glass, the blown vault door, alarms just ringing into the middle of the night.
It's loud.
Yeah, it's loud, it's violent. And you walk into the bunk the next morning, and it is overwhelmingly obvious that something valuable has been taken from you.
Because you can literally see the empty space where the gold used to be.
Right. Without a doubt that you are a victim.
But when you step into the world of human psychology and biology and societal structures, well, suddenly that imagery just completely falls apart.
It really does, because we are looking at an entirely different kind of crime scene today.
A completely silent one.
Yes. Today we are exploring the ultimate true crime story, but it's an intellectual and psychological heist. We are investigating how human agency, like our very ability to make our own choices and pilot our own lives, is systematically stolen from us.
And, the most terrifying part of this specific heist is that the vault door is never actually broken.
No, the alarms never go off. You just walk in, you go about your day, make your coffee, and you don't even realize you've been robbed.
Which is the absolute definition of a silent crime. And
Yeah.
the perpetrators aren't wearing ski masks. They aren't holding you up at gunpoint.
Not at all.
The perpetrators are our own biology, our deepest underlying existential fears, and the societal scripts we are handed the very moment we are born.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are so glad you are here with us, because today's mission is, frankly, going to require you to question everything you think you know about your own life.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is.
Yeah.
We're going to figure out how we are biologically wired, how we are existentially terrified, and ultimately how societal scripts and malignant personalities exploit this exact wiring to hijack our agency. And we are going to look specifically at how women in particular are targeted in this systemic manipulation. We're going to completely dismantle the myth of biological submissiveness along the way.
And this journey requires us to be exceptionally analytical. We have to look objectively at the machinery of human behavior.
Yeah, it's not about taking political sides or getting swept up in ideology, right?
Exactly. It's about looking at the psychological and societal dynamics presented in our sources today and just asking what is actually happening beneath the surface of our choices.
Because if you want to understand how a heist happens, you first have to understand the security system of the bank.
Or, the complete lack thereof in our case.
Right. And that means before we can even begin to understand how our agency is hijacked by other people or by cultural expectations, we have to start at the absolute baseline.
We have to ask a really uncomfortable question.
The most uncomfortable question you can possibly ask yourself. Did you ever really have agency to begin with?
Are you actually in the driver's seat of your life?
Because to answer that, we have to look at the underlying science of free will.
Right.
We need to understand the baseline of human vulnerability.
And the neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky provides one of the most compelling and, frankly, disturbing lenses through which to view this.
Oh, absolutely.
He has spent his entire life studying the brain, and he highlights a concept that completely destabilizes our traditional view of human choice.
Yeah, I was reading through his research on this, and I had to just put the text down and stare at the wall for a minute.
It's intense.
It's a phenomenon often referred to in behavioral economics and neurobiology as the hungry judge effect.
Right.
Let's really dig into the mechanics of this, because it sounds like a joke at first, but the implications are just staggering.
It is a landmark observation about how biological states dictate complex, supposedly rational choices.
So, picture this setting. You have a parole board. These are highly trained, highly educated judges.
Very serious people.
Exactly. Their entire professional existence, their entire mandate from society is to be perfectly objective.
They are supposed to sit in a room, weigh the evidence of a case, look at a human being's behavior in prison, and evaluate their psychological profile.
Right, and then make a rational, conscious decision about whether that human being deserves freedom. They're meant to be the absolute pinnacle of human agency and rational thought.
But when researchers actually crunched the data on thousands of these parole decisions, the severity of the crime wasn't the biggest factor.
No.
The prisoner's behavior wasn't the biggest factor.
Which is crazy.
The single greatest predictor of whether a prisoner was granted parole was simply how many hours it had been since the judge ate a meal.
I mean, the physiological mechanism at play here is just sheer blunt biology.
It comes down to blood sugar.
Yeah.
The prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain responsible for executive function. It handles emotional regulation, impulse control, empathy, and making difficult, nuanced decisions.
And it is incredibly metabolically expensive.
It requires a massive, disproportionate amount of glucose to operate compared to the rest of the brain.
It's an absolute energy hog.
It really is. So, right after a judge has eaten lunch, their blood sugar is high, their prefrontal cortex is fully fueled and firing on all cylinders.
Right, they have the energy.
They have the metabolic energy required to look at a complex case, weigh the nuances, feel empathy for the prisoner's rehabilitation, and make a difficult, proactive decision.
Like changing the status quo and granting parole.
Exactly. But as the hours tick by, that glucose depletes. The prefrontal cortex literally starts to starve.
Wow.
And when any biological system is starved of energy, it defaults to the easiest, most energy-conserving path possible.
Which, in the case of a parole hearing, is just saying no. Denying parole is the default state.
Yes.
Because it takes zero mental heavy lifting to just leave the person in jail. You don't have to justify a change. You don't have to take a risk.
The critical thing to understand here is that the judge does not consciously think, I am hungry, therefore I will deny parole because my brain is tired.
Right, they aren't aware of it at all.
Their conscious mind is completely blind to the biological heist taking place. They will rationalize the decision perfectly.
They will point to a minor infraction in the prisoner's file from 3 years ago and say, well, this is why I kept him in prison. He's clearly not ready.
They genuinely believe they are making a rational choice. But the data is undeniable.
The likelihood of a favorable ruling drops to nearly zero right before a meal break.
And then it spikes right back up to around 65% immediately after they eat a sandwich.
I mean, if a judge's ruling on a person's literal physical freedom years of a human life is dictated by the sandwich they did or didn't eat for lunch, what does that say about the choices you and I make every single day?
It's a very unsettling thought.
Right. If you're listening to this and thinking about the last time you had a massive argument with your partner or made a snap decision at work, how much of that was actually you and how much of that was just a dip in your glucose levels?
It forces us to confront a very uncomfortable spectrum. We might easily concede that biology affects our mood, like we've all been hangry, right?
Oh, definitely.
But Sapolsky's argument, which is rigorously supported by neurobiology, is that there is no magical dividing line between the biology that makes you cranky when you're hungry and the biology that dictates your entire life path.
Okay, I want to stop you there and push back on this a little because this is where my brain just starts rejecting the premise.
So it's a very normal reaction.
I can accept that my blood sugar makes me irritable. I can accept that maybe I chose vanilla over strawberry ice cream because of some genetic taste receptor thing.
Right.
But there's a massive difference between picking an ice cream flavor and choosing who I marry or what career I pursue or whether I decide to move across the country.
It certainly feels that way.
Surely, when it comes to those massive life-altering decisions, my conscious free will has to kick in.
It feels that way, absolutely. But Sapolsky would argue that your big decisions are simply the cumulative, macroscopic result of millions of small biological and environmental dominoes.
Falling in a sequence.
Falling in a specific, predetermined sequence. Let's trace it back. How did you become the type of person who chooses that specific career? It's not a vacuum. It is the result of your inherent neurochemistry, which was shaped by the specific genes you inherited.
Okay, genes, sure.
But those genes interacted with the specific prenatal environment, the stress hormones or nutrients your mother was exposed to while pregnant.
Wait, really? So the foundation is poured before you even take a breath?
Exactly. And then you are born into a specific socioeconomic environment. The level of ambient stress in your childhood home physically alters the neuroplasticity of your developing brain.
Wow.
It changes how your amygdala processes fear, which changes how much risk you're willing to tolerate as an adult.
So even my risk tolerance is wired in early.
Yes. Layer on top of that the cultural values of your community, the specific peer interactions you had at age 12, the hormonal shifts of puberty.
It just keeps building.
Every single choice you make at age 30 is just the inevitable endpoint of a chain of biological and environmental events that stretches back long before you were even born. You didn't choose the brain that is currently making the choice.
Okay, my mind is genuinely spinning right now.
It's a lot to process.
Because if we accept that, it feels like we are just passengers.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to bring in the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson's perspective here. Because He takes Sapolsky's neurobiology and zooms it out to the scale of the entire cosmos.
Right. Tyson looks at human agency through the lens of physics and chaos theory.
The universe is a clockwork mechanism. It's a classic deterministic view.
Yes.
He points out that the universe is governed by unbreakable physical laws. If you have a closed system, and you know the exact starting position and momentum of every single particle in that system.
And you know all the laws of physics.
Exactly. Then you can perfectly mathematically predict where every single particle will end up a minute from now, a year from now, or a billion years from now.
It's just an incredibly complex math equation.
So if the universe was set in motion billions of years ago with the Big Bang, aren't you and I just made of those exact same particles?
We are.
So are my choices today, the literal words coming out of my mouth right now, just the inevitable mathematical result of atomic collisions that started 14 billion years ago?
That is the hard determinist stance. We are extremely complex biological machines, but machines nonetheless obeying the same laws of physics as a rock rolling down a hill.
But, as Tyson points out, when people are confronted with this terrifying idea, they immediately look for an escape hatch.
And usually they point to quantum physics.
Yes, the quantum realm.
Yeah.
Because down at the subatomic level, things aren't predictable like rocks rolling down hills, right?
That is the argument, yes.
I've read that quantum mechanics involves true fundamental randomness. A radioactive atom decays randomly. Virtual particles just pop into and out of existence without a predictable cause. So the argument goes, look, the universe isn't purely deterministic. Randomness exists at the fundamental level of reality. Therefore, determinism is false. Therefore, we have free will.
It is a very common philosophical pivot, but let's look at the mechanics of why that completely fails to rescue human agency.
Okay, let's break it down.
You have to ask yourself, what is the actual definition of free will? Free will requires intent. It requires authorship. It means you are the architect of the action.
Okay, yeah, I am the author.
So if your actions are dictated by the predictable, unbreakable laws of classical physics, you are a machine. You have no free will.
Right.
But if a neuron in your brain fires not because of a predictable chemical cascade, but because of a random, unpredictable quantum fluctuation, a microscopic dice roll, does that give you free will?
Oh, no, it doesn't.
Why not?
Because I didn't choose how the dice landed. It was just random.
Precisely. If your actions are dictated by quantum randomness, you are not a machine. You are a roulette wheel.
Wow. A roulette wheel.
If a random subatomic particle decays and causes you to blurt out a specific word, you didn't intend to say that word, the universe just rolled a die.
Right.
A roulette wheel does not have free will any more than a clockwork gear does. You are either at the mercy of inevitable particle collisions, or you are at the mercy of quantum static.
In neither scenario are you the author of the choice.
Exactly.
So, if I'm understanding this correctly, it feels like I'm the CEO of my life. I've got the corner office. I've got the fancy nameplate on the desk. I'm wearing the suit.
You think you're in charge?
I think I'm running the company. But really, my conscious brain is just the PR department.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
The actual decisions are being made down in the windowless basement by the biology, the genetics, and the physics. And my conscious mind is just scrambling upstairs to write a post-hoc press release to explain a decision that was already made behind closed doors.
The conscious mind is essentially just a spin doctor for the unconscious machinery. It creates a narrative of control so we can function without losing our minds.
But wait, if that's true, then it's just the PR department, and the script is already written by biology and physics. Why do I feel so much?
What do you mean?
Like, why do you, listening to this, experience so much agonizing anxiety about making the right choice about your career or your relationships? If the script is already locked in, why does the actor feel so much absolute terror on the stage?
And that question is exactly what bridges the gap from the biological baseline to the psychological reality we live in.
Because it's agonizing.
Because you're entirely right. We may be biological machines playing out a deterministic script, but we are a very specific, tragic type of machine.
Tragic how?
We are machines burdened with self-consciousness. We are machines that are aware of our own existence and aware of our vulnerability. And that awareness creates a profound, inescapable psychological angst.
Which means we have to move into the work of Dr. Irvin Yalom on existential psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Because if biology tells us we have no actual control over the steering wheel, existential psychology tells us that this lack of control absolutely terrifies us on a primal level.
Yalom's work is foundational here. He focuses on what he calls the ultimate concerns or the givens of existence.
Right, the givens.
These are the inescapable, objective facts of being a human being in the universe. You cannot meditate them away. You cannot buy your way out of them.
They are just facts.
And the confrontation with these facts creates a deep underlying terror in the human psyche. The most prominent and driving force among these is, of course, the terror of mortality.
Death anxiety. The ultimate loss of agency.
Exactly. Think about the biological imperative we just discussed with Sapolsky. Every single cell in your body, every neurological pathway is evolutionarily programmed to survive, to replicate, to heal, to avoid destruction at all costs.
We are survival machines.
Yet through some bizarre evolutionary quirk of the prefrontal cortex, we are uniquely cursed with the cognitive capacity to understand the concept of linear time.
Right. We can project forward into the future.
And when we do, we inevitably hit a brick wall. We know with absolute unshakable certainty that we are going to die.
So our hardware is screaming at us to live forever, but our software is constantly reminding us that we absolutely won't.
It's a fundamental conflict.
That is a massive, agonizing glitch in the system.
It is the core paradox of the human condition. It creates an intense, humming baseline of anxiety beneath literally everything we do.
And Yalom argues that this drives a huge portion of our behavior, doesn't he?
He argues that a huge portion of human behavior, our drive to build monuments, our ambitions to be remembered, our creation of religions that promise afterlives, are all reactions to this.
And importantly for this deep dive, our desperate clinging to romantic relationships.
Yes. They're all elaborate defense mechanisms. They are psychological shields designed to deny, distract from, or somehow transcend this terrifying reality of our own mortality.
And it doesn't just stop at the fear of death. Yalom talked about something else that hit me incredibly hard when I was going through these sources. He talks about existential isolation.
This is a concept that often gets misunderstood. This is a very specific, profound type of loneliness.
Right. It's not the loneliness of not having plans on a Friday night or feeling a bit disconnected at a party.
No, it's not social loneliness.
I'd love to try an analogy here to see if I'm grasping it. Imagine you are at a massive, bustling party. You are surrounded by people.
Okay.
But every single person at this party is speaking a slightly different language. A language only they fully understand.
Right.
You can gesture, you can translate the basics, you can smile and laugh together, but you can never, ever truly convey the exact nuance of your thoughts to them, and they can never fully convey theirs to you.
You are surrounded by life, but trapped entirely inside your own head.
Yes.
That captures it perfectly. Yalom describes it as an unbridgeable gulf between oneself and others. You can have a loving partner, a beautiful family, a million friends.
Right.
You can be as intimately connected to another human being as physically and emotionally possible. But at the end of the day, your conscious experience is entirely, exclusively your own.
You enter the subjective world alone, and you leave it alone.
Exactly. No one else can feel your physical pain for you. No one else can experience the exact texture of your consciousness.
So even in our most intimate moments, there is a wall of glass between us.
And what's fascinating here is how this isolation interacts with the death anxiety we just talked about.
Oh, wow. How do they mix?
When we realize we are fundamentally alone in our own subjective universe, and we simultaneously realize that this subjective universe will eventually be completely extinguished by death,
The terror becomes almost unbearable.
we stare directly into the existential void. We realize how small and utterly alone we are in the cosmos.
Then we panic.
We absolutely panic. And what do humans do when they panic? They look for an immediate escape. They look for a savior.
Which is why Yalom focuses heavily on group therapy and deep interpersonal relationships.
Because they address our desperate, clawing need for connection. We desperately seek meaning and connection to fight against the despair of this isolation.
We want to feel like we are part of something larger than our fragile selves.
We want to be seen. We want to be understood. We want to feel that we matter so much to someone else that we almost become a part of them.
So if we combine the biology and the psychology, we are floating in this dark, infinite ocean of existential dread.
Yes.
We are exhausted, we are terrified of drowning, and we are fundamentally alone. We are so desperate for a life raft that if someone comes along and throws us a line, we might not check to see if it's actually a life raft.
No, we wouldn't.
We might not check if the person on the other end is actually reeling us into a trap.
Yeah.
You just grab onto it because the alternative is facing the void.
That is the exact crux of human vulnerability. That is the open bank vault.
Wow.
When you are terrified of isolation, when your biology is screaming at you to connect for survival, and your existential dread is pushing you to merge with someone to escape the emptiness, your agency is incredibly fragile.
You are primed psychologically and biologically to be hijacked.
Which brings us to the actual heist. We have established the baseline.
We know the security cameras are turned off by biological determinism.
We know the vault doors have been left wide open by existential terror. Now we introduce the predator.
Yes. We are moving into the highly analytical and frankly disturbing work of Professor Sam Vaknin, who studies narcissism alongside the cultural analysis of bell hooks, who looks at patriarchal structures.
This is where the societal scripts come into play.
Exactly. We are going to explore how malignant personalities use societal scripts to systematically hijack women.
Yeah.
And I want to emphasize this again for the listener. We are framing this not as a bad breakup, not as a toxic relationship, but as a literal systemic heist of human agency.
And to do this properly, we must look at it objectively, strictly through the lens of Vaknin's psychological profiling and Hook's societal observations.
Right.
Vaknin presents a harsh, unvarnished truth about the nature of malignant narcissism that society often tries to gloss over.
And what is that truth?
Narcissists fundamentally hold women in contempt. At their core, the pathology is deeply misogynistic.
Let's really dig into the mechanics of that, because there is a massive paradox here that the sources highlight.
Yes, paradox is key.
Vaknin talks a lot about what he calls the cerebral narcissist. These are individuals who derive their grandiose sense of self not from their physical appearance, but from their intellect, their minds, their perceived towering superiority over the average person.
Right.
And he notes that many of them are actually quite asexual. They rarely desire physical intimacy, and they actively abhor true emotional intimacy.
To a narcissist, true intimacy is an existential threat. Intimacy requires vulnerability.
Right. It means letting your guard down.
It requires taking off the mask and recognizing the other person as a separate, autonomous human being with their own needs and flaws.
And they can't do that.
Doing that would completely shatter the narcissist's grandiose false self, which relies on the illusion of their own absolute perfection and omnipotence.
But here is the paradox. If they are largely asexual, if they view intimacy as a threat, and if they hold women in contempt, why on earth do they obsessively seek out female partners?
It is a profound contradiction.
Why do they go through the effort of getting married? Why do they always have a girlfriend or a spouse? If you hate the bank, why do you keep going inside?
Because of a vital psychological concept Vaknin terms secondary narcissistic supply, or SNS.
This concept completely blew my mind. I need us to go as deep as possible on this, because this is the actual mechanism of the heist.
To understand secondary narcissistic supply, we first have to understand primary supply.
Okay, let's start there.
A narcissist's core psychological reality is that they have a dead, empty core. They do not have a regulating internal sense of self-worth like a healthy person does.
So they can't just feel good about themselves on their own.
No, they rely entirely, 100%, on the outside world to reflect a grandiose image back to them so they can feel like they exist.
That reflection is primary supply.
Yes. It's the applause, the fear, the admiration, the attention they get from the public, their colleagues, their employees, or their audience.
But primary supply is inherently unstable. You can't be on a stage getting a standing ovation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right. Audiences get bored.
You lose a job. A project fails.
Exactly. Primary supply naturally fluctuates. There are dry spells. And for a narcissist, a lack of supply doesn't just feel like a bad day. It feels like psychological annihilation.
It feels like they're ceasing to exist.
It is a full-blown internal crisis. So they need a backup system. They need a reservoir of supply they can tap into when the outside world isn't cooperating.
And that is precisely where the female partner comes in.
That is her designated function in the pathology. She is the secondary narcissistic supply.
I was reading Vaknin's breakdown of this, and I genuinely gasped. Because society tells us that people get married for love or companionship or building a life together.
But according to this pathology,
they aren't looking for a partner at all. They're looking for an external hard drive for their ego.
That is a chillingly accurate way to describe the dynamic. Vaknin uses the word chores.
Chores.
The woman is brought into the narcissist's life to do chores. But these aren't domestic chores in the traditional sense of doing the laundry or cooking dinner.
Right.
These are psychological chores. Her primary, exhausting job is to accumulate the narcissist's past moments of glory.
She has to witness his greatness.
She must meticulously memorize his achievements, agree with his grievances, and act as a living, breathing, emotional memory bank.
So, practically speaking, what does this look like on a random Tuesday?
Imagine the narcissist comes home from work. He felt slighted by a boss or a presentation didn't go well. His primary supply has taken a hit.
He's upset.
His grandiosity is fracturing, and he is spiraling into a depressive or rageful state. The woman's chore in that moment is to expertly deploy a specific memory of his past brilliance.
She has to say, but remember how amazing your presentation was last month?
Yes, remember how everyone said you were the smartest person in the room? You were so much better than them.
Wow.
She has to act as a human thermostat, constantly adjusting her own behavior and feedback to regulate his fluctuating pathology.
She is literally being used as a battery. She charges up on his grandiosity when times are good, storing all that energy, and then she's drained to keep him functional when times are bad.
Yes. And this brings us directly to the societal element of this deep dive, which is where the work of bell hooks becomes so crucial.
We have to debunk the myth of biological submissiveness here.
Absolutely. Because a lot of societal scripts, a lot of deep-seated patriarchal conditioning tells us that women are just biologically wired to be submissive.
That they are the natural caretakers, to be the emotional regulators for men.
Right. The idea that women are just more empathetic, so it's natural for them to manage a man's emotions.
Exactly. And Vaknin's analysis of the pathology, combined with Hook's analysis of the culture, utterly shatters that biological myth.
Narcissists do not choose submissive women because women are biologically destined to submit.
No.
They deliberately target and choose women they can condition into submissiveness. It is a tactical, predatory requirement for the heist.
Because you can't use someone as a battery if they insist on maintaining their own agency and their own boundaries.
Precisely. Bell Hooks points out that under patriarchal scripts, boys are often socialized from a very young age to sever their connection to their own emotional vulnerability.
They are taught that anger is the only acceptable emotion.
Because they are not taught how to self-regulate, they are structurally conditioned to rely on women to do that emotional labor for them later in life.
The narcissist takes this societal baseline and weaponizes it to the extreme. The culture has already prepped the vault. The narcissist just walks in.
But there is this twisted, vicious cycle that Vaknin describes that makes the abuse even worse. The narcissist chooses a woman he perceives as controllable.
Okay.
But because his grandiosity demands that he is a godlike figure who only associates with the absolute best, the brightest, the elite, he simultaneously disdains her for being below his intellectual level.
Wait, so he looks at her submission, the very thing he requires to survive, not as a gift of love, but as pathetic proof of her inferiority. So he absolutely needs her to survive, but he actively hates her for being the type of person who would put up with him. That is maddening.
It creates a massive, volatile internal conflict for the narcissist. He experiences intense neediness. He desperately needs her to regulate his secondary narcissistic supply.
Because if she leaves, he collapses.
But this profound neediness triggers intense self-contempt. The narcissist looks in the mirror and thinks, I am a towering intellect, a superior being. How on earth am I dependent on this inferior, submissive woman?
And where does all that self-contempt go?
It is projected entirely outward onto the woman. The verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse stems directly from this resentment.
He is punishing her for his own dependency.
Exactly. When primary supply is abundant, out in the world, say he just got a promotion and everyone is praising him, the woman at home is barely tolerated.
Vaknin likens it to reluctantly paying the premium on a very expensive insurance policy.
You hate paying it, you resent the cost, but you know you need it just in case of a crash.
Though the notes mention there is an exception to this disdain.
Yes. Narcissists of all stripes regard the active subjugation of a highly attractive, independent, previously strong woman to be a massive source of primary supply in itself.
Breaking a strong woman is a trophy.
It proves to the world and to himself just how powerful he is. Look at this incredible woman, and look how she bows to me.
It proves his omnipotence. But the key takeaway for you, the listener, is that this subjugation is systemic.
It relies on the patriarchal scripts Hooks discusses.
Scripts that normalize men outsourcing their emotional regulation, and scripts that condition women to believe their inherent value lies in providing that regulation, even at the cost of their own sanity.
And the terrifying part is how they get away with this.
Right. If this is a heist, how does the thief walk out the front door in broad daylight? How does someone perpetrate this kind of deep psychological destruction without society noticing and stepping in?
By hiding in plain sight. And this brings us to one of the most dangerous profiles Vaknin outlines. The prosocial or communal narcissist.
Right, because when we normally think of a malignant narcissist or a psychopath, we picture the overt, bullying, chaotic monster. We picture the guy yelling at the waiter or the completely dysfunctional tyrant.
Yes, you are describing the low-functioning malignant narcissist. They are overtly dysfunctional. For them, almost any human contact triggers their sadism and paranoia.
They justify their cruelty with grandiose contempt for everyone.
But because they are so abrasive and chaotic, their lives inevitably accumulate severe adverse outcomes. They get fired constantly, they get divorced, they lose friends, they get arrested.
And eventually, to preserve their fragile ego from the undeniable reality of their own failures, they withdraw from society.
I want to pause here because the sources mention a specific term for this withdrawal. They adopt alloplastic defenses.
What does that actually mean in plain English?
An alloplastic defense is a psychological mechanism where, instead of adapting yourself to reality or taking responsibility for a failure, you blame the external world.
You try to change the environment, or you blame the environment to protect your ego.
So the low-functioning narcissist gets fired, and instead of saying, I need to work harder, they say, the boss is an idiot, the company is corrupt, and I shouldn't waste my towering intellect on these peasants anyway.
They withdraw into a delusional bubble.
Okay, that makes sense. But the prosocial narcissist doesn't do that?
No, the prosocial narcissist is highly functional. They operate perfectly, almost seamlessly, within an in-group.
They are very often the charismatic leaders of a community, the beloved pastors, the generous philanthropists, the celebrated CEOs.
They wear a meticulously crafted mask of deep communal care and altruism.
But it's just a mask. It's a tool for supply.
Entirely. They direct all their visible goodness, their charity, and their charm to the public in order to harvest massive amounts of primary supply.
But all that suppressed psychopathy, the rage, and the sadism, that doesn't go away.
No, it is directed exclusively at the outgroup, or far more commonly, it is unleashed entirely on the people trapped behind closed doors with them.
The battery, the woman providing the secondary supply.
Yes. To the outside world, he is a literal saint. He would give the shirt off his back to a stranger, but to his partner, in the privacy of their home, he is a monster.
And this pro-social mask makes the interpersonal heist nearly impossible to detect from the outside. Think about the mechanics of it.
If the victim reaches her breaking point and tries to speak out, if she goes to her friends or her community and says, he is destroying me, what does society do?
Society looks at the charismatic leader, the guy who volunteers on weekends, and says, him. No, he's a great guy. He's so nice to everyone. You must be crazy. You must be misunderstanding him.
Exactly. The societal script actively protects the predator and inadvertently gaslights the victim. The community becomes an unwitting accomplice to the heist.
Which makes the victim feel even more crazy and even more isolated, driving them right back into the existential dread we talked about with Yalom.
It is a perfectly designed, inescapable trap. But it raises a massive question for anyone listening.
If this manipulation is so damaging, if the woman is being used as a literal appliance, a thermostat for someone else's ego, why do they stay?
Why do the women targeted by these scripts remain in the vault while it's being robbed?
To understand that, we have to look at how the heist is disguised. The predator doesn't walk up and say, I'm going to use you as a battery.
Well,
the heist is disguised as romance. The predator weaponizes the existential fears we discussed by wrapping them in the cultural mythology of love.
Which means we need to dismantle our cultural understanding of romance. We are transitioning to Vaknin's analysis of what love is not.
Because we have a lot of societal scripts, a lot of fairy tales about what love is supposed to be.
And according to this deep dive, almost every single one of them is not just wrong, but actively dangerous.
They are the very vulnerabilities the narcissist exploits. Let's look at the most common one, the illusion of merging.
Okay, yes. Think about every pop song on the radio, every romantic comedy you've ever watched, every societal script about marriage.
They all tell us that romantic love means two becoming one.
You complete me. You're my other half. We are two halves of the same soul, finally finding each other.
Vaknin's work utterly debunks this as a healthy dynamic. Loving someone is not merging with your partner.
Merging is the erasure of boundaries.
It is the literal erasure of individual agency. When you merge with someone, you lose track of where you end and the other person begins. You lose your independent thoughts, your separate desires, your unique identity.
Which is exactly what the narcissist requires. If you merge with them, you become an extension of them, you become the external hard drive.
You stop being a person and start being a very compliant tool.
Exactly. Merging is a symptom of the heist. It is not a symptom of romance. True love requires two distinct, autonomous individuals.
If you are merged, you cannot actually love because there is no other left to love. There is only a single enmeshed blob fueling a shared pathology.
And that leads to the next massive misconception the sources point out, loving the reflection versus loving the person.
Vaknin points out that loving someone is not the same as loving the way they love you.
This is a subtle but incredibly crucial distinction. Ask yourself, are you loving the actual, flawed, complex, independent human beings standing in front of you?
Or are you simply in love with the idealized version of yourself that they are reflecting back to you during the initial love-bombing phase of the relationship?
It's loving the feeling of being in love rather than loving the person.
Yes, and this dynamic relies entirely on fantasy and idealization. Vaknin states this unequivocally true love never involves fantasy.
Fantasy is the primary, indispensable tool of the narcissist.
During the idealization phase, they create a shared fantasy, a bubble where both of you are perfect, where you are soulmates, where the outside world doesn't matter and nobody understands you like they do.
But fantasy is a complete denial of reality. You cannot truly love someone if you are interacting with a perfect avatar of them that you constructed in your mind or that they constructed for you.
Because eventually, reality always breaks through the fantasy, and when it does, the narcissist punishes you for not living up to the avatar.
But why do we buy into the fantasy so easily in the first place? We go right back to Dr. Yalom. We are trying to escape the void.
Precisely. Loving someone is not the same as hating your own loneliness. It is not the same as desperation.
If you are using a relationship merely as a shield against your underlying existential isolation, if you are grabbing that life raft without checking who threw it, it isn't love.
It is mutual exploitation. You are using the narcissist to avoid facing your own existential terror, and they are using you as secondary narcissistic supply.
You're just two terrified people using each other as human shields against the dark ocean of existence.
And society heavily encourages this dynamic. It tells women especially that their ultimate salvation from isolation, their ultimate proof of worth, is a romantic partnership with a man.
It frames a woman being alone not as autonomy, but as a tragic failure.
This intense societal pressure pushes women directly into the arms of predators who offer a false, fantastical escape from the void.
And there's one more deeply ingrained script Vaknin tears down, the parental role. He states that loving an adult romantic partner is not about assuming a parental role.
This ties perfectly back to bell hooks and the patriarchal scripts of emotional labor. There is an insidious idea that a woman's love must be unconditional, endlessly forgiving, and endlessly nurturing.
Much like a mother's love for a helpless child.
Narcissists, who are essentially emotionally stunted toddlers trapped in adult bodies, actively seek out women who will mother them.
They want the unconditional, positive regard and lack of accountability that they perhaps never got in childhood.
But if a woman is mothering her adult male partner, she's not his equal, she's his caretaker.
Her agency is completely subsumed by his endless childish needs.
Correct. It creates a one-way flow of energy. Think about it. A mother does not extract secondary narcissistic supply from a toddler to regulate her own ego. A toddler extracts it from the mother to survive.
When this dynamic plays out in an adult romantic relationship, it is deeply toxic, fundamentally unequal, and incredibly draining for the woman.
Okay, let's pause and synthesize this, because this is heavy for anyone listening.
If society tells us love is a fairy tale where we merge souls, mother our partners, and use romantic fantasy to escape our inevitable loneliness, and psychology is telling us that's exactly the script malignant predators use to steal our agency, then what is true love?
Is it just two fully autonomous people standing side by side facing the existential void together without using each other as human shields?
Based on the synthesis of Yalom and Vaknin? Yes, that is exactly what it is. True love is a triumph of reality over fantasy.
It is the excruciatingly difficult daily task of seeing another person exactly as they are, flaws, trauma, and all.
Acknowledging their absolute separateness from you and choosing to care for their growth and well-being without ever losing your own identity in the process.
It is maintaining your agency while fiercely respecting theirs. It is not a magical cure for existential isolation. It is a companionable, courageous witnessing of it.
Wow. That is so much harder and less cinematic than a romantic comedy, but it feels so much more real.
It is real, and it is the only kind of interpersonal relationship where human agency is preserved rather than hijacked.
So we've gone on quite a journey. We went from the microscopic biology of a hungry judge's prefrontal cortex through the existential terror of the human condition, right into the living rooms where malignant narcissists are executing psychological heists on women using patriarchal scripts.
But we need to zoom out now for this final stretch. We need to look at society and accountability.
Where do we go from here with all this information?
We have to bring Robert Sapolsky back into the room because he poses a massive, almost insurmountable challenge to our justice system and our morality.
We have laid out exactly how a malignant narcissist operates. We've shown the psychological mechanisms, the trauma, the empty core.
But if we accept Sapolsky's fundamental premise that biology, genetics, and environment dictate everything, that free will is a complete illusion, does that explain everything?
Right, because this is the trap of determinism. If a malignant narcissist acts out of biological and psychological determinism.
If they had severe childhood trauma, genetic predispositions for low empathy, and a brain structurally wired to require external supply.
Are they still responsible for the horrific abuse they inflict on women? Is the predator morally accountable if the physics and biology of the universe dictate that they couldn't choose to be anything other than a predator?
This is where the debate gets incredibly thorny, and where people naturally resist the science. How does a functioning society factor in accountability when choice is an illusion?
Sapolsky argues quite consistently that you cannot hold someone morally responsible if they truly didn't have the free will to author their own actions.
But wait, if we don't hold predators accountable, society completely collapses. We can't just let narcissists and abusers run around destroying lives and say, oh, well, it's not his fault. It's just his prefrontal cortex and his childhood trauma.
Let him go. That's an unacceptable outcome for victims.
And Sapolsky entirely agrees with you. He doesn't say we let dangerous people roam free to cause harm. He advocates for a medical or quarantine model of justice rather than a moral, retributive one.
Think of it this way. If a car has a broken brake line, you don't hold a trial to punish the car.
You don't say the car is evil and deserves to suffer for its broken brakes.
But you absolutely, unequivocally take the car off the road, because if you don't, it's going to run someone over and kill them.
So it's about quarantine and public safety, not moral retribution and vengeance.
Exactly. You remove the dangerous person from a position where they can do harm. You protect society. You protect the victims.
But you do it without the self-righteousness of moral judgment. You recognize that the narcissist is a tragically broken machine, just as you recognize that the victim was a machine made vulnerable to being hacked by their own biological and existential scripts.
But what does a society even look like if we truly deeply accept this lack of free will across the board? It wouldn't just change the justice system, it would change everything.
According to Sapolsky, it would require a fundamental, agonizing revolution in how we view each other. Most notably, we would have to completely give up the concept of meritocracy.
Give up meritocracy. That's the foundation of modern Western society.
The idea that if you work hard, you succeed, and you intrinsically deserve your wealth and success.
But if there is no free will, meritocracy is a comforting lie.
If you are the CEO of a company, you didn't earn it through the sheer independent force of your own soul. You were the incredibly lucky recipient of the right genes, the right neurochemistry, the right socioeconomic background, and a brain that happened to be wired by chance to value hard work and delayed gratification.
You simply won the deterministic lottery.
And the flip side of that is profound. If you end up struggling, if you end up in poverty, or if you end up the victim of a narcissist's heist, it's not because you were inherently weak or foolish or morally lesser.
You lost the lottery. You were handed a script, a biology, and a societal framework that made you vulnerable.
Precisely. A society that truly accepts the absence of free will is forced to be a profoundly compassionate society.
It acknowledges that the powers outside our control, biology, physics, societal scripts, are the true architects of our lives.
It means we stop blaming victims for being hijacked, and we start aggressively looking at the systemic structures like the patriarchal scripts bell hooks identifies that set the stage for the heist in the first place.
But as we wrap this up, there's this ultimate paradox that came up in the Tyson and Sapolsky debate, and it has been itching at the back of my brain this entire conversation.
Neil deGrasse Tyson asks a brilliant question. Do we have the free will to determine whether we believe in free will?
It is the ultimate philosophical mind bender. If I am determined by my biology to believe in free will, I have no choice but to believe it.
If I am determined by this deep dive to realize free will is a myth, I have no choice but to realize it.
So what's the point of this whole deep dive? If your brain is already predetermined by the Big Bang to either accept or reject what we're saying, are we just making noise into the void?
Are we just watching a movie play out?
If we synthesize everything we've discussed, here is the answer to that paradox. Even in a strictly deterministic universe, inputs still matter.
Information is a tangible environmental input that physically changes the neurochemistry and the neuroplasticity of the brain.
The societal scripts and patriarchal structures that hijack women's agency rely heavily on the illusion that victims are freely choosing their submission. The narcissist relies on the victim believing the illusion of the shared fantasy.
The heist only works if you don't know the vault has a back door.
Exactly. Recognizing the biological, existential, and psychological machinery at play is a massive new input. It changes the equation in your brain.
It is the only way to begin dismantling the heist. You cannot fight an enemy you do not understand.
When a woman understands the concept of secondary narcissistic supply, when she recognizes the pro-social mask of the community leader for what it is, when she sees how her own existential dread of isolation is being weaponized against her, her brain is physically and psychologically altered by that knowledge.
The script gets rewritten by the new information.
The machinery adapts. So while we may not have magical physics-defying free will that lets us step outside the universe, we do have neuroplasticity. We can be changed by the truth.
You can be reprogrammed by understanding.
Wow. Okay, we have covered an immense, staggering amount of ground today. We started with the hungry judge, looking at how a simple drop in blood glucose can literally dictate a man's freedom, proving just how fragile our conscious agency really is against our biology.
We moved into the dark, terrifying waters of Yalom, exploring how our unique human awareness of death and our fundamental isolation in our own subjective minds creates an ocean of existential dread.
And we saw how that dread makes us desperate for connection, leaving the vault door wide open for Vaknin's malignant narcissists.
We unpacked the absolute horror of secondary narcissistic supply, how women are targeted not out of romantic love, but to be used as human batteries, emotional thermostats to regulate a predator's fluctuating empty ego.
We integrated bellhooks to show how patriarchal scripts prime women for this exact exploitation. And we exposed the pro-social mask that allows these predators to hide in plain sight as community leaders while being sadists behind closed doors.
And we dismantled the dangerous societal myths of fake love, the merging of souls, the maternal caretaking, the romantic fantasy, revealing them not as romance, but as the very mechanisms of the psychological heist itself.
And ultimately, we looked at society as a whole. We questioned the nature of moral accountability, we challenged the comforting illusion of meritocracy, and we realized that the only way to dismantle a system built on patriarchal scripts and psychological exploitation is to relentlessly, analytically expose the machinery of it.
Because understanding the mechanics is the ultimate and perhaps only defense against manipulation. You cannot be silently robbed if you know exactly how the lock gets picked.
To you, listening right now, this matters. It matters profoundly to your daily life. Because these scripts are everywhere. The predators are hiding in plain sight, wrapped in the comforting language of love, romance, and societal expectation.
But now you have the blueprints to the security system. You know how the vault operates.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We've established a terrifying reality today. Your biology pulls the strings, your existential fears blind you, and societal predators are constantly trying to hack into that fragile system.
But does the very act of learning about this heist, of looking directly, unflinchingly at the gears and pulleys of your own determinism, finally give you a sliver of true, authentic agency?
Can understanding your absolute lack of freedom be the only thing that actually sets you free?
That is the question of a lifetime.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the muddy, terrifying, but ultimately illuminating waters of human agency. Keep your eyes open, watch out for the PR department in your brain, and remember to always check your vault doors. We'll see you next time.